It can be added to the Glasser Institute's site. So generally, we have a presenter or a conversation. But I was in I went to an event last night. And I just want to drop this in the room and see if anybody else has anything they'd like to say about it. But I was in Macon last night. They had the opening of what used to be called the Indian Festival in Macon, but they've changed the name. It's no longer the Indian Mounds. It's the oh gosh, now I can't remember, but the the whole idea is to honor the indigenous people who were here and own the land, and for folks to be able to visit the mounds and see it as sacred space, and it's just so many things. There was just but it was a wonderful event. But aside from being taking part in the event that took place last night, there was uh, uh, an older white man who came up to me. Well, he just came up to me, and I was talking to him and his wife. I've known him for a long time, and he said to me that he found out something that he found out something about himself and his family. Okay, let me get this right. He had known a man in his professional life who was a Native American who, just kind of, he'd known him professionally, met him at, at conferences and so on and so forth. And recently, he had found out that the land that this man's family came from in Georgia, his family took possession of. So when the Native American man's family was forced to leave Georgia, this white man's family, took possession of that land. So and he's a very kind, white man and he said, I knew if I came, I said, oh my gosh, we need to have this conversation. But he said he's not having the conversation because he only feels safe having it with people he trusts and people he doesn't think will attack him. And so I understand that, but I thought that maybe there should be a way for us to start the conversation, because I invited him here, but he's not here. Um, and maybe we could offer, or you all could offer some suggestions of things that I can say to him to help him to know that it is okay to try to have a conversation with the Native American man that he called friend, but he didn't ever really know anything about this person's background. And that because, and he said it in our conversation last night, the way our history has been taught and the way people continue to perpetuate this history, I felt, I felt, and he didn't use the word cheated, and I can't think of the word he used right now, but he really felt bad that his ancestors had distorted the story, and and so therefore he had his whole life. He's in his 50s now. In his whole life, until recently, he's had all this bad information. So, and we had a conversation about this a couple of years ago, and I think I told him about that too. We called it Truth Meets Trauma, where we talked about how white people were injured, wounded by the enslavement of other people. But but I just want to put that out there for us to talk about. And then, how is there anything that we can think of from a CTRT perspective that I could offer him, or anything for that matter, that I could offer him um, to help him to be able to be willing to have the conversation with this man. And I told him, I just tell y'all, I told him So isn't it interesting? We pretend to be friends with people and we don't even really know them. And so you didn't because he didn't know where this man's family originated. So it's just superficial friendships, and we do that a lot. Um, and so what does that do? What does that do to our relationships? So I'm gonna open up the mic to anybody who has um, anything they want to share about that. Thank you, Andrew, for that link. Anybody have anything to say?
Well, um, if we're going from choice theory perspective, we can't change the past.
Mm-hmm.
We can apologize for it and we can try to make amends for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What really matters is what he does going forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if he goes forward and tries to make amends, then he's trying to be a better person than what his past and his past family has been.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're looking at from a choice theory standpoint, can't change the past, but we can make the future better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Andrew. Thank you. And when I think about that, I hear it. And so one of the things that was said repeatedly in the event last night was this idea of stewardship. So they transferred or changed the language from because what happened is people were just their land was just taken, and um, and of course there is no plan to give the native indigenous people their land back. But it was interesting to be in that space, and I mean there are lots of Ocmulgee Creek Indians, and there are actually several different groups of Ocmulgee Indians who were there, but it was very interesting to be in that room with all of those people and and have the sense that something was still being taken, or yeah, something just felt a little bit off about the whole idea of stewardship, or using the word stewardship over the land. So, but anyway, thank you, Andrew, and you're right when you say there's nothing we can do about the past. Um, and but I wonder, um, yeah, yeah, I'm sorry, because I started thinking all about these different kinds of traumas and how now we have to. Um, and Neb said it the last time we were together, this idea of time being, different. It's not, if we believe that time is linear, then that's how we believe and how we think. But from an African, what did you say? What is it, Neb? African reality therapy perspective. Time doesn't is not necessarily linear. Um, And I keep trying, Neb. For the life of me, I can't remember exactly how you frame that. But um, so then, how do we sit with someone? Um, how do we have these conversations? I could tell y'all all the stuff I said to him, but um, and he said, he said, I feel like I should be paying you. But the idea, and I told him, I said, it's not necessarily a conversation you should have with me. I really think it's a conversation you should have with him. And how do you really become friends with somebody that you call a friend, from this point forward? How do you do that? And how, so that you can have the conversation with him about learning recently that it was your family that acquired his family's land. Are you saying something to us now?
Yeah, I mean, many times we may have a discussion um, with people around how do we fix that which is broken, and that which is broken uh, is not just what happened in the past, but what happens now. We
Mm-hmm.
have to begin with forgiveness, forgiveness of self as well as others. The other thing is how do you memorialize? Because memorialization is part of this whole concept of equitable justice. How
Mm-hmm.
do we not only think about uh, restitution or reparations, and how do we measure that? Most of the time, we're not going to get back what we took
Mm-hmm.
because um, if we did that, then uh, just about all of us would have to leave. Um, Even though that's a different concept. So understanding that that's not going to happen. How do we psychologically, emotionally, uh, and fix what is broken? I think you begin with uh, what we used to call reality. The reality is that this happened, and the reality is that it's not going to be returned. But how do we work with the people who feel offended to understand that that is not who we are, it's
Mm-hmm.
who we were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that idea of that is not who we are because I remember and Jody, I'm just calling your name because we had a conversation um about this, and the problem with the way that history's been recorded and taught is that there are so many things that were omitted, right? Like all the story of all the abolitionists who supported um, the end of slavery, and so what we have come to this place with is the idea that all white people are one way when or bad, which is not true, not true. So how do we fix what's broken? So we have to tell each other the truth, I think, and we have to learn history more accurately. Um, I'm going to read that in a second. Andrew, actually, what I think I'll do is let you say it out like as it pops up. I get distracted. I can't read that little bitty type.
What does amends for the past look like?
mm, mm,
Because some people might call it reparations, some people might call it amends, some people might call it memorial. But what does that look like for each person who's been wronged in the past? How do we make amends?
wow. I don't know. I don't know. I like the idea of memorializing things, but I don't know. Come help me, somebody. That's why I brought it. I brought this conversation to
Can you
us.
hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Mhm.
Okay. Um, what is acceptable has to be socially constructed. And
Mm.
social constructivism says that the only reality that exists between the two parties. It is not
Mm.
my reality nor your reality. It is our reality. So what is acceptable has to be negotiated between those who were offended and those who were offended.
Wow. So how does that happen when people don't always want to sit down? Here we go with the solving circle. Well, people don't always want to enter the circle, and because we live in a society that believes that what is it? Believes in the zero sum theory. If you gain something, I have to give up something, right? So how do we do this, Neb? How do we get to the two parties in this game?
Well, I think you started it with the truth. What happened, what
Hmm.
is happening, and once we begin with this is part of our reality, then we have to face whatever is going on and whatever went on. It is not that we pass determinant of the future, but it has some influence. And the idea of time being linear says what has happened no longer continues to happen. But until there is forgiveness on both sides, it does continue. And what has happened may or may not ever be fixed. For instance, look at what happens when someone is falsely imprisoned and they stay there for 30 years, and then they come out and the state turns its back on them. But that is not fixed. That is something we talked about this before. The epigenetic trauma that goes from generation to generation. So if we are to heal, we have to break that cycle of trauma, and that is not on the victim only. It is also on the perpetrator. How do you end that? And whether you're willing to do it or not determines whether or not things will change. It doesn't mean that the trauma will no longer exist if you turn your back on it and say, I am not responsible for someone else's behavior. We are all interdependent and interconnected. I am responsible for your behavior. You are responsible for my behavior, unless you just don't want to fix it.
I like that you dropped interdependent in there again, because we are interdependent. And I don't know, well, I do know how we got to this place where we started to believe and practice as if we were independent. But we're not. We're not. We all really truly need each other. We need each other. So Andrew, did you read your question? Oh yeah, you did. That's what Neb was addressing. All right.
Can I say just one more thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably going to hang up. But the other piece is it's not just to the individuals who have been offended and the offender, but they live in a society. They live with other people. So you can always reach out if you choose and receive help, because you were not the only one who participated in this. And the remedy exists in the offense, in my opinion. I mean, I am not there, so I can't walk the walk of either one of these people. But the bottom line is that which is broken can be mended. And I hate to go, but I'm in the airport, so I'm leaving. I wish I could stay, but I'll talk soon. All right.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your input. Be safe. Safe travels.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. But he left us with some really incredible words. I mean, that which is broken can be mended. So it is possible. We just, I would imagine, have to think about how it is that we can function in a way that helps the people around us see a see the mending, the ability, the possibility of mending, and then maybe direct them, influence them towards a path that leads to the mending. Make sense?
Gloria, may I share my screen for a minute?
Sure, let me make you co-host. Hold on.
It's saying it was so very non condemning. There's a process known in Japan as kintsugi.
Yeah.
I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I never thought about this in terms of what has happened in our country, what happens in relationships. I know nothing about CRT except the book on my bookshelf that I need to show my people. But hey, I'm retiring, so what they do when I leave this district is, but there was something Neb said that just caused me to look that up again and want to share that image because we're broken. We are so broken, but the concept of that art form really is to take something broken and not just totally destroy it, but to create something beautiful with something even better. That's gold
Mm-hmm.
that's used to repair those pieces. And so that's what we have to work we have to work toward. And how, I mean, I think, as I think about anti-racism, I think about the person with whom you spoke last night. He has already taken a first step in that he has formed a friendship that he's now learning is superficial. He's formed his friendship with someone outside of his circle, someone of color, a person of color. And so he's taken a partial step, but now the next, and he's humbled and even hurt by what he has learned, what he's learned, what he knows. And that's major growth
Big.
for, I'm sorry, a white male in this country
Mhm.
to actually acknowledge a wrong that was done. And for him to
And how he
see
benefited
that,
from it. I just had to
uh,
say it.
what were you saying?
I said, and how he benefited from it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even say, even if I were the wrong person or group, I wouldn't say that the immediate response is just for him to give that land to his friend. But I think the next step that he has to take, and that's the kintsugi part, is how do I have how do I make myself vulnerable to this other person and listen to what the other person reaction is to this knowledge, not pulling away, because I think he will lose tremendously if he pulls away from this friendship. Because I believe it's a friendship. It's just that because we have to keep ourselves safe, we go into friendships at varying levels of vulnerability. And so for him to, and I'm sure that's what he was trying to get you to help him to do, to find a way to go deeper, I think. And that's what it's going to be about, going deeper. Because if he continues in that friendship and he does not allow that secret uh, to become a part of their conversations, then it really does become a superficial friendship and it's not a real friendship. I think if we could figure out how to beautifully mend, but there has to be a desire too on all parts to mend this brokenness. We are so broken. Um, anyway, thank you.
Girl, I think that what you're saying, what Nev said, what Andrew is saying, what everybody's saying is right on point, because the fact that he calls this man friend is a big deal. And we talked about that, and the fact that I mean, we were at a formal event and he did not look like he had shaved in a couple of days. And it may, and he looked very sad, and I couldn't, once he started talking to me, then I started kind of, like trying not to connect, the way he looked with what he was experiencing, because he decided to show up for that event, right? And looking at all those people and thinking about what he was thinking about, and but I was really, and I told him I was very proud of him for being willing to say what it was that he said to me. And he said, "I'm telling you, I'm saying it to you because I trust you." And we know that means he thinks I'm not going to talk to nobody about it. Nobody will know. No, y'all don't know his name. Y'all don't know anything about him, right? It's just a case study. But 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 the but he said it. And so now you've given me some other things I can say to him. Like, the first thing he did was have this friendship, right? And so that's that's really powerful. And the second part is that he acknowledged what had happened. When he found out this information, he's like, "Oh my gosh." And but the other piece The other piece I think that might be a little bit of a tripping place is that he doesn't want to have this conversation. And so I wonder, how is it going to impact his friendship if he holds the secret? I don't think he's going to be able to have a really decent friendship with this person, because he's going to always be on guard about and protective of the words that he doesn't want to slip out of his mouth, right? I think he's going to have the conversation. Yes, Keisha. Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much.
I'm already enjoying this conversation. I feel very impassioned in my spirit and my soul just to hear it. The thing that came to my mind about what the gentleman said was, it's not who we are, it's who we were. Well, I can tell you for a fact that we still have this proclivity, we still have this inclination. I think these kinds of conversations are a starting place, and I am grateful to be here. But the thought that comes to my mind is, we have to move from pity and sympathy into something more like empathy with compassion. I think that's what will give us the impetus to open our hearts and minds. We have to see what this does to another person. And one of the things that I've had the hot displeasure of realizing is that people who mistreat others because of race or religion or any other arbitrary reason, they are the problem, meaning that they have the problem. And so to have him even be willing to admit this and want to start the conversation is, in my estimation, encouraging, because most of us just don't say, and we won't admit, and we're so fearful. These kinds of fireside conversations that are difficult require such an open-heartedness and open-mindedness that most of us don't have. And this is what I'm praying about, that we can take steps forward, albeit baby steps, but moving forward. What comes to mind in Glass's work for me is, in choice theory, looking at external control psychology juxtaposed to choice theory and those habits that connect us, that make us feel safe, the supporting, encouraging, being willing to listen without rebuttal, without cutting over a person because you're uncomfortable about your historical context in that situation, being able to accept them, who they are, their heritage, what their background is, what they may even be going through today in this climate that we're in, is a starting point. But we have to build trust and mutual respect as we negotiate through these differences, with the reality that this is tough, it's painful, and it is not going to be easy to solve. But most of us jump right into shrouding and concealing and not wanting to deal with it or confront it. And that, to me, goes back over to the external control psychology. We might even look at the person who's wanting to start the conversation and say, well, what's wrong with them is, and we may criticize, blame, complain, nag, threaten, all of these things that are about punishments. And even when it looks like we're taking steps, it might just be bribing. So I think what we have to step forward with is the truth that this is hard. It is painful, and start there. And then we would need agreements, whether in community or in connection, one person to another person, and have a way to start that. And with the foundation of, this is not easy, this is very hard, I have anxiety about it, or whatever the case may be, but I want to move forward in this, and then set agreements for that conversation. This is what I do in my marriage of 30 years when we're dealing with something difficult. I really take this choice theory to heart. I do it with my adult children. When I'm dealing with things, I let their feelings be heard. And it has to be where we're on par with having compassion and empathy, operating in our hearts and minds such that we can open up to commence. It's got to start somewhere.
Exactly. Something that Jaylyn said was this idea, and thank you, Keisha. That's really, you're right. You're 100% right. And the conversations have to be had. They have to be had. But the piece that I think might be, and I think this is part of the man's problem that I was talking to last night, and that is his willingness to hear the other person's anger or their disappointment or their hurt. If he doesn't want to hear that, he's not going to want to have the conversation, and that takes a certain level of vulnerability, right? You got to say, ooh, okay, I got to do this. It's gonna sting. It's gonna sting. But if I want the relationship to progress, then I have to be willing to hear those things that don't sound so good. At least not to me. They don't sound good to me, but the other person needs to be able to say it. And not in a way that's hurtful. Well, however they need to say it. You know what? I wrap that tissue around it, and I realize that sometimes people just need to say things the way they need to say them, and we have to try to listen with compassion and understanding. And yeah, we talk about not hurting each other with words, but sometimes people just have to say things the way they need to be said. I don't know. What do y'all think? Go on, Rhonda. You have your hand up.
Not only do we have to have the conversation, we have to experience what the other person has experienced to really understand what they have gone through,
Mm-hmm.
and be vulnerable with and transparent.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to have the same experience that other people have, but if you could just like imagine putting yourself in somebody else's place
Hmm.
and thinking about how they must feel in that situation, it really helps a lot, and I say that because when how we teach people parenting, and people say, how can you teach me about parenting and you don't have any children, right? And and y'all know I got plenty of kids. I got plenty. This is just an example. But simply, Glasser even addressed this in one of his books. He said that he was talking to someone who had been to prison, and they told him, "Well, you've never been to prison, so you can't know what my experience has been like, and you can't, or you can't. How can you help me?" And Glasser says, "I've never been to prison, so I can teach you how to not go to prison. I have information that I can use to help you. I can't help you go back to jail. That's not who I am or what I want to do, but I can help you learn how to do something that will keep you from going to jail." So we can help people to understand that it's okay to be uncomfortable with your discomfort, and learn to be comfortable with your discomfort, right? We have At some point we got to learn how to be comfortable. Otherwise, we don't have change. We don't have any change. Wow, y'all are
So
amazing.
that means then, Gloria, the
Uh-huh.
next step he needs to take is to learn how to do that, not just have a secret conversation that's confidential um, with someone totally not with, okay, not, okay, so having a conversation, thank you, with a therapist is not a secret, but he was not in a therapist client position. So now the next step is how much do you want to alleviate the obvious guilt that you're feeling and deepen this friendship with this other person? So now the step has to be taken to go through a process, because all of those wonderful things that Keisha was mentioning, I'm like, I don't know how to do that on my own. I don't know how to take those steps on my own, but someone can guide him through a process of having those conversations, because he could make a total mess of someone else's life and a lifelong friendship if it's not done properly. But now he really shows what he wants by asking someone to help him go through this process with this friend, so that they both emerge uh, uh, hurt probably, but healed.
Healed. Yeah, I'm thinking about that bowl that's been glued back together, right, with gold. You know, you got those broken pieces, but if you take your willingness to be vulnerable and to be understanding and to be empathetic, I mean, that's the gold right there, that men's relationships. And so, got to do it. We just have to do the work. I'm sitting here, I'm taking notes, and I'm thinking how, because I'm gonna call him and ask him if what he wants to do about the way he feels right now about what's happened, his discovery and his friendship, and how he, in what direction does he want to take his friendship. I'm gonna ask him, and I'm gonna, and I'm just gonna get the information, and then I already started working on some things that I can offer him. Thank you, y'all. Andrew has his hand up.
Dr. Cisse, I think you gotta look at what he wants, exactly what you said, what he wants from the friendship. If he wants a true friendship with him, he's got to have that hard conversation and maybe try to role play it with him so he can say the right things in a more delicate manner, maybe. I just, if he doesn't say anything, what will happen with the relationship? If he does say something, what will happen with the relationship? We got to look at the weight of what he wants from the relationship. So I think you're spot on when you say we got to know what he wants from the relationship. If he wants to continue to have a superficial relationship with this person, then he'll just have to cope with the guilt by himself. If he wants to help, if he wants to have a deeper connection to this person, he's going to have to do the painful things and put some gold on that crack and make it through. So I think it all boils down to exactly what he wants from the relationship.
Oh, he'll be getting a call from me. Let me tell you. I don't even know. I don't even know how I can wait until Monday. Oh, I got his cell phone number. I'm just talking. But I'm not gonna talk to him today because I'm tired. But anyway, and I need to process. Really need to process all of this, and I hope that us having this conversation in this recorded, safe environment is us modeling how other people can process these types of situations. And if other people watch these videos, then they can take from our conversation and think about how to mend the relationships that they have. And so this few people here have the opportunity, the potential really to influence a lot of people. Yeah. Anything else, y'all? I think it's amazing I have these little experiences before the DDD call.
May I say something about the other side too?
Sure.
In this age of social media, so I make myself vulnerable, and then pictures of the land that I'm living on appear on social media, and look at what this person's family took from me, and what, so, that fear of that being made vulnerable in that way, and then having people you don't even know attack, accuse, so this instant society, instant condemnation, but then there's a slowness to acknowledge wrong and apologize. So I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just thinking about it from that. There's work that he needs to do, but it's also there's another level of vulnerability that comes with making ourselves vulnerable to a single person. I would hope that their friendship is such that, you know, as he works through a process of healing the friendship that the other person doesn't even know is broken, as he goes through that process, uh, he'll be able to maybe believe that he won't be hurt in that way. But society is just horrible. And I want to say evil now in the way social media is used to disparage, to denigrate, to condemn even the, you know, even people with uh, with no malice in their actions.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I'm pretty sure that's part of the reason, you know, he's hesitant about um, bringing it up. So the other piece would be then, how do we help him to reconcile all of this stuff without actually telling his friend uh, this information that he discovered recently? I don't know how he can get around it, honestly. Because I'm sorry, but as soon as I said it, it was like, so then I have to keep a secret from my friend the whole rest of my life. And I know we do that sometimes, right? I know sometimes it's necessary to keep secrets from people. But anyway, so I put that out there. So what do you all think about that? I like the idea of role playing. I like the idea of the being cognizant of the vulnerabilities and how stuff gets into the social media and so on and so forth. But what about just keeping the secret? How does that help anybody? Go on, Jim.
Are you proud of me? I raised my hand this time.
I'm always proud of you, no matter what.
Um, what will be gained from sharing that information? That is a key question. And I think that goes back to, I don't know if Andrew said it or someone said something about motivations or something, but what is gained from sharing that piece of information? It's a serious question.
Hmm. Hmm. I think I heard that question, or I read that question when I was doing I was studying, I was doing a marriage counseling certificate program, and they, they, the person was asked who had an affair, right, and on their partner, and they wanted to tell the partner. They were asked, so what would it benefit? How does it benefit your relationship to share that information? I know that's a whole different situation, so don't jump in there and start talking about no, we ain't gonna be. It's a whole nother situation, but it's the same question. What'll be gained by sharing the information? Yeah, it's a very good question. All right. That's all I have to say about that today. Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
This is Keisha.
Uh-huh.
I'm just so encouraged.
Thank
I
you.
am so glad that I had a lot going on and I almost didn't make it. And I'm so grateful that I showed up. This is what I've been thinking about for years, that when society, someone said, is behaving in a very evil way, but it's really nothing new. Alan Gregg did work on sites of shaping, how we're shaped by the spirit and landscape of what goes on in our society through social norms and historical forces. And it shows up through institutions and makes its way down to communities and to families, down to each individual. And I've really been thinking about that lately. And instead of being miserable about the suffering that I see all around me, what I feel is encouragement in the fact that individuals can change, families can change, even communities like this one is promoting a way of changing, a way forward through conversation. So, albeit it's small steps, it begins with truth, with reality. And so I will definitely be coming back to future meetings here. This is exciting.
Thank you very much for joining us. We really are glad you're here. And y'all, Keisha listened to one of our previous videos and decided to join us. So I'm glad you're here. We sometimes have a kind of different format. As a matter of fact, Judith is from the Northwest region, is going to present next month, and then we have other people who come and they bring a topic. So it's always a little bit different. But thank you for coming. Thank you for contributing. Thank you everybody for being here. I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that you've learned something, and I appreciate it. And I hope I'll see you all again next month. Have a great rest of the day. Be
Good
safe out
weekend.
Take
And
care,
it
everybody.
got me to start thinking, just thinking.
there. Thank you.
And that's a start. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Thank
All right,
you.
hey,
All right. Bye, y'all.
bye.